This podcast is brought to you by Mercury, the banking solution I use across all of my businesses. I manage half a dozen Mercury accounts, from my personal single-member LLC to MicroConf, our seven-figure global events and education platform, to TinySeed, our venture fund and accelerator. Mercury handles every one of them. Traditional banking forces you to duct tape tools together and work around slow processes. Mercury doesn't. The dashboard shows me exactly where each business stands at a glance. The interface is simple enough for daily banking and paying invoices, but can also handle the multi-step approval processes we need when wiring large sums of money to the dozens of companies we invest in each year. There's a reason more than 300,000 entrepreneurs have made the switch. Anytime founders ask me where to set up their accounts, I send them to Mercury.com. It's free to get started with no in-person visits and no minimum balance. Visit Mercury.com to apply online in minutes. Mercury is a fintech company, not an FDIC-insured bank. Banking services provided through Choice Financial Group and Column NA, members FDIC. And so to take two businesses at the same ARR and say they're going to be growing the same amount while one is more profitable, the one that's more profitable could actually be growing faster if you weren't putting all that money in the bank. Profitability is a drain on growth. And since growth is what drives exit multiples, that's the thing that I personally would be looking at if I wanted an amazing, life-changing exit. Welcome to another episode of Startups for the Rest of Us. I'm your host, Rob Walling, and in this episode, I answer listener questions on topics ranging from QSBS, exit multiples, when they move from profit to ARR, why people talk about ARR multiples with SaaS, how to learn marketing as a developer, and more listener questions. Before we dive in to that tasty goodness, TinySeed applications are open. So I run one of the best startup accelerators in the world for SaaS companies. It's called TinySeed, and we open applications twice a year. You can head to tinyseed.com/apply if you're interested, if you're a B2B SaaS founder doing at least $500 in MRR. And if you have questions for the TinySeed team, we're doing a live stream on February 11th, 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll leave a link in the description of this show so you can get notified when we go live. And if you want to know what it's really like to go through the TinySeed Accelerator, you should check out TinySeed Tales Season 5 with Harris Kenny. That show aired on this very podcast feed just, I guess it was 5 months ago. If you scroll back, you'll see the episodes marked with the title. And it saw Harris reach $500,000 in ARR after joining the Accelerator. It wasn't an easy journey. And if you go to tinyseed.com/bonus, you can access a private coaching call that I did with him as he was making some really hard growth decisions. So tinyseed.com/apply if you're interested in applying. I hope to see you there. And with that, let's dive into my first listener question.
Hey Rob, thanks for all that you do with Startups for the Rest of Us. It's meant a lot to me and my business. My question is about business entities. We are looking at changing to an S Corp because we have positive revenue. And I think it would be financially make a lot of sense, but it makes me wonder whether I should be thinking a lot more about becoming a C Corp for the specific reason of the QSBS, the Qualified Small Business Stock, and the potential tax benefits upon an exit. What is your latest thinking? As the background, our business is entirely bootstrapped and we're not looking for outside funding. So really it would just be for the QSBS taking the double taxation hit along the way. Penciling it out, I guess there's a few ways it could go. I'm curious what the latest thinking is that from the bootstrapper's perspective. Thanks so much. I look forward to hearing your response.
For those who aren't familiar, QSBS is a U.S. tax benefit that applies to eligible shareholders of a qualified small business. So it's qualified small business stock. And this is a United States IRS exclusion or a federal government exclusion from taxes. And I'm not a lawyer nor an accountant, so Google this or ask ChatGPT. But the general idea is if you own shares in a company, and that includes founders, and you sell for less than a certain amount and you hold those shares for 5 years or longer, you pay no federal income tax on that sale. And the limit used to be really low. It used to be $10 million. And in July of 2025, it was raised to, I believe, $15 million. And you have to hold it for 5 years or longer. But if you only hold it 3 years, you get a 50% exclusion. If you hold it for 4 years, you get a 75% exclusion. 5 years gives you the 100%. So the idea here is taxes in the US are not great. And, even long-term capital gains taxes can hit you for 20% if you sell millions of dollars, plus there's a 3% this, and then you have state taxes and you have all this stuff. But to be able to sell a company and to not pay federal capital gains tax is a big deal, and it'll save you money. Now, the question is about whether Ryan and his co-founders should go with a C Corp or an S Corp, because you only get the exclusion if you are a C Corp. And the answer really, truly is it depends. Do you think you're going to hold the company for at least 3 years? Because even that 50% exclusion, imagine selling for $10 million and not paying, federal tax on $5 million of that. It's a huge deal. That's at least $1 million in your pocket that would otherwise go to the federal government. And it's actually more because there's like a 3% Affordable Care Act thing. Again, I'm not an accountant. I just know what I've seen happen to my money when I sold, and then other founders. So it's a significant amount of money. The big question is, do you think you'll hold for 3 years, and do you think you will sell your stock versus an asset purchase? So when an acquirer buys you, sometimes they buy the stock. That gives them the liability. They have to take on the liability then of your company. If they only buy the assets, then you retain the liabilities. And there's no hard and fast rule, but I do know generally the smaller the acquisition, the more likely it is to be an asset purchase. What I don't know is where I'd say that line is. $5 million and below asset purchase, probably more common. $8 million, $10 million and below asset purchase, is it more common? I don't know. I should probably ask Einar Volset. I have seen acquisitions in the $8 to $10 million range that were stock purchase agreements, especially when the company was a C Corp and they said, I'm only going to sell shares because I get this tax-free status. And so that then is a signal to an acquirer that if you are not willing to buy the stock, you want to buy the assets, then don't make me an offer, because I'm not going to entertain it because of the significant tax savings that I'm going to get if I sell shares. So all that to say, today, if I were starting a startup, knowing what I know now, knowing that everyone sells, having seen some folks qualify for QSBS and other folks not because they started an LLC or an S Corp, I personally would do the C Corp, and I would take the double tax hit in the short term. And I would be looking to sell for, assuming I'm looking to sell for 10 to 30 million, 10 to 40 million, somewhere in there. That's seems to be a reasonable target number for a lot of TinySeed folks. And that's the tact I would take. Now, is that the right answer? No. There is no right answer for this one. This is not even a rule of thumb. You know how I give guidance? Don't do B2C, two-sided marketplaces that take a percentage of GMV, all that stuff. This is not that. This truly is, if you want to start a lifestyle business and you think you might just take out dividends over, the long term, or you're not going to keep it for at least 3 years, or your exit's going to be small enough that it's an asset purchase agreement. There's all these things that could go the other way that will make maintaining a C Corp a pain in the ass for you. Then you shouldn't do it. And that's I think really what it comes down to. But the majority of companies we back with TinySeed are C Corps. And in fact, with our latest fund that we raised, that we just closed, that fund only invests in C Corps. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. It actually makes everything simpler for us. We have invested in LLCs and entities from other countries, and it is a significant burden financially and time-wise to do that. Now we know why venture capitalists don't do that. But realistically, if you want to raise additional funding later, or if you want to, have a significant exit, it's certainly a decent signal to have that C Corp. So thanks for that question, Ryan. Hope it was helpful. My next question is from Alan Reed. The subject is exit multiples based on top-line revenue. When people talk about exit multiples, they usually focus on top-line revenue, especially ARR. There seems to be much less emphasis on EBITDA or free cash flow. Why is that? All else being equal, is a company with higher ARR but lower free cash flow really worth more than a company with lower ARR but stronger free cash flow? I've heard that exit multiples typically range from 4 to 7x ARR. Does that range factor in differences in profitability? This is a good question, Alan. People talk about exit multiples, including me, in terms of ARR, only when we're talking about SaaS, because SaaS is the best business model in the world. So you don't talk about ARR or even just top-line revenue exit multiples with e-commerce, with agencies, with content sites, with other types of online businesses, because they just don't sell for that. Those are sold like more traditional businesses. And the reason we talk about it on this show as ARR is because SaaS is one of the only businesses that sells for top-line revenue multiples, because SaaS is such an incredible recurring business model. And especially if you achieve net negative churn, you can really have incredible multiples on that ARR. When you sell a SaaS company for, let's say it's around 2 million is where the crossover point is, 2 million and up. And that used to be lower. It used to be about 1 million, but then times change. Inflation, it's inflation and different economic times. If you sell for 2 million and up, you should be, I'll say, thinking in terms of an ARR multiple, even if you're not growing quickly. Let's say you're flat or just growing 10% a year or something, and you're at 2 million. I would be looking at a 1 to 2x ARR multiple as a loose rule of thumb. And there is no other business type that's really a thing. It's just so often talked about as an EBITDA multiple. And if you're at 2 or 3 million, or 5 million, it doesn't really matter, and you've doubled in the last year, let's say you grew 100%, yeah, you're talking 5 to 10x ARR, 4 to 8x, somewhere in that range. And it can be higher than that. I've seen a 15x ARR multiple on a business doing several million because it had negative churn and it just was a intense bidding war. It's all a market. It's a marketplace. It's an auction, right? So when we give these multiples, think of them like a bell curve. And I can say, well, the smallest one I've ever seen is a 0.5x ARR, and the highest one I've ever seen is a 20x ARR. And those are factual statements. But if you look across 100 sales, the big bell in the middle is probably at 5x or something, and then it goes out from there and gets smaller on each side to the point where, there's only, there's 10 in the middle, and then there's 8 and 8 on each side, and then there's 6 and 6, and it just kind of slopes down until have I seen one that's sold for 0.5x and one that's sold for 20? Sure. That doesn't mean that that's the range. I'm not going to say it's 0.5x to 20 because that's not helpful for anyone. And it's just how narrow do you want the part of the bell curve to be? How directed do you want it to be? And so I can say 5 to 10 or 4 to 8, but it is somewhere in there. The thing is acquirers in that range tend to be strategics, or they tend to be private equity. And what they really care about is growth. The top 3 things they look at are growth, growth, and growth. And then churn is the next one. And the absolute revenue amount, like if it's 2 million versus 5 million versus 10 million, also matters. And Einar Volset can come on here, and he's done a whole talk on this topic that's really good. But growth is what matters, and that's what will drive growth and churn, and that's what will drive that ARR multiple up. So your question of all else being equal, is a company with higher ARR but lower free cash flow really worth more than a company with lower ARR but stronger free cash flow? The answer is yeah, it can be. For sure, because think of it, free cash flow is a short-term thing. Free cash flow is now. I want to take out cash out of the business now. And if I'm buying a $2 or $3 million business, ARR SaaS company that has 10% net negative churn, and I'm going to pump millions of dollars into growth, and I can then grow this thing to 10 or $20 million ARR, and I can sell it for a 4 to 8x multiple. Let's say I get it to 20 million. It doesn't really matter if it's profitable. Let's say I sell for 100 million at that point. Does it matter that it was profitable? No, because I'm making the money on the exit. And so therefore, the profitability doesn't matter because you are truly looking at the future and what you can get for the business down the line. And even if, let's say, so you're only looking to sell it, let's say you grew it to 20 million ARR and it truly is net negative churn 10%, you could cut back on staff. And at scale, a SaaS company can have gross margins of 80 to 90% and net margins of, let's say, 30 to 50%. And for easy math, let's just say you can get that $20 million SaaS company to a 50% net margin. You are throwing off $10 million a year at that point in free cash flow. And that's a number that matters. Not I'm doing $2 million a year and I'm going to try to crank out $750,000 in profit this year, $1 million a year. That sounds like a lot to us. it just doesn't move the needle of these acquirers. And so no, they don't care about cash flow in the short term. It doesn't really matter nearly as much as the fundamentals of the business and how they see they can grow it. And growth and momentum and churn or retention, those are just opposite sides of the same coin. Those are the things that are really intriguing, because when you look, what am I going to do with this business in the next 3 to 5 years, which is how private equity thinks about it, and probably how strategics think about it as well. That's what matters. So your last question is, I've heard exit multiples typically range from 4 to 7x ARR. Does that range factor in differences in profitability? If you're growing, they don't care. If you're growing, they don't care. And if I were to sell a business doing $3 million a year and it was profitable versus $3 million a year and it was break even, and they were both growing as fast, yeah, I guess maybe the profitable one would get a slight bump. But you know what? If you're profitable, you're not investing in growth. You're putting cash in the bank, and so you're not going to be growing as fast, almost inevitably. And so to take two businesses at the same ARR and say they're going to be growing the same amount while one is more profitable, the one that's more profitable could actually be growing faster if you weren't putting all that money in the bank. Profitability is a drain on growth. And since growth is what drives exit multiples, that's the thing that I personally would be looking at if I wanted an amazing, life-changing exit. So thanks for that question, Alan. Hope it was helpful. If you're a founder with a strong vision but no technical partner, you need more than a vibe-coded MVP. You need a real foundation. That's where Designly comes in. Their Solution Lab prototyping sprint is a focused 2-week collaboration where you work together with a seasoned product owner, a developer, and a designer to define what to build, why it matters, and how it should look, feel, and function. You'll turn your idea into a beautiful and clickable prototype, something you'll be proud to show to early users or investors. Designly is the product team you can actually trust, with a track record of helping founders move from being ghosted by dev shops to growing real businesses. And right now, Designly is giving my listeners $3,800 off their Solution Lab prototyping sprint. To get started today, check out designly.co/fortherestofus. That's designli.co/fortherestofus. My next question is from Andrew Miller on the interaction between co-founders and mastermind groups.
Hey Rob, long-time listener for about 5 years now. First-time question asker. I am getting way ahead of myself and have been reading your exit strategy book. Excellent read. We're nowhere near exit, but you mentioned masterminds, and masterminds have been mentioned plenty of times at all stages of the business. And I just wondered what your opinion on when you have co-founders, like should you be in the same mastermind group as your co-founders, or should you be seeking out separate mastermind groups each? Thanks for all you do. Thanks for the community. It's amazing.
This is a great question, Andrew, and I wanted to answer it really quickly here on the show. I would not want to be in a mastermind with my co-founder because I think it's a waste of time to have two high-functioning co-founders getting the same information and spending that same time in a group. You want a myriad of opinions. You want different inputs, different smart people thinking through the problems that you have. So I have never been in a mastermind with a co-founder, and I think that's a good thing. In addition, what if you start having trouble with your co-founder? You want to talk to your mastermind about it, how you should handle this tricky situation with a co-founder, which has, it definitely happens. I don't feel like there's 100% right and wrong answer, but I'm probably 95%. I personally would not want to be in a mastermind with my co-founder. And I think that's probably the general advice that I would give to founders who ask me this exact question. Thanks for that question. Hope it was helpful. And my next question is from Sebastian at sidestack.io. Sebastian asks, do you have any thoughts on SaaS that earns additional revenue through transaction fees based on customer GMV or gross merchant value? Do you see this type of revenue the same way as usage-based fees, or is it higher or lower quality? This is a really good question. So if I was starting a bootstrapped or mostly bootstrapped SaaS today, I would not make it solely based on customer GMV. But Sebastian specifically asked, thoughts on a SaaS that earns additional revenue, meaning you are charging a monthly fee, just like monthly or annual, just like any other SaaS, additional revenue through GMV, I think is a great fucking idea. If I had any way to do this that made sense in my SaaS, I would 100% do it. I see the GMV being higher quality than usage-based fees because it tends to be, it depends on the business, but it tends to grow over time in a way that usage can be spiky and not grow as smoothly. In addition, with GMV, as you charge them a percentage, you can also lower your credit card processing fee by switching away from, there are providers that are really easy to get set up on that are 2.9%, but you can find processors that do I think it's like 1.5 or 1.9, it's somewhere in there. And so you could still charge like a totally reasonable fee. Let's say it's 1.9. I don't actually remember the bottom end that I've seen TinySeed company get to, but it's somewhere in the 1 points. So if you get to 1.9 and you're charging 2.9, you're taking a percentage of 1% of GMV. If you charge that 3.9, 4.9, which is pretty reasonable in a lot of contexts, like you are taking a significant amount of customer revenue, not a significant amount of their revenue, but it adds up across your customer base of 100, 500, or 1,000 customers. So do I think this is as good as MRR? Probably slightly less, but man, it really depends on the curve. It depends on how smooth it is. And if it's truly going up over time, as your MRR is, I think you can make the argument. You're certainly going to try to make the argument during an acquisition that this is high, super high quality revenue. And I have seen businesses acquired. We have, 234 investments I'm in, and I would say there's at least, it's more than 10% have a GMV component. It's 20% feels high to me. So let's just say 15% is going to put you at 35, 38 companies. And it's good revenue. Usage-based is different, right? I see we have folks who have SMS. They charge for SMS or charge for emails sent or charge for whatever. And you'll see it's super spiky. Even if the trend is that it grows over time, it's not nearly as smooth as customer GMV. So think about, my last SaaS company I did, which was Drip, email service provider, marketing automation. We didn't process payments. So there was just no real opportunity to do a percentage of GMV. And so we didn't charge it. But if I had the opportunity, the option, and it made sense given my product category, 100%, I would have that as a component of my pricing. So thanks for that question. I hope my thoughts were helpful. And my last question of the day comes from Sean.
Hey, Rob, my name's Sean, and I hear you mentioning that it's very important to have a founder who does sales and marketing on the team, and I think that sounds like a very reasonable suggestion. If I'm a developer and I want to learn this stuff myself, it's so hard to learn about marketing because there's just so much garbage out there. There's so many self-promoting marketing gurus. It's 80 to 20 fluff to actual content, or sometimes worse. So my question for you is, where can a developer who wants to do a single founder bootstrapped SaaS go to learn really basic marketing techniques without all of the fluff? Any pointers you have for me would be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much for the podcast. Keep it up.
Thanks for this question, Sean. This is a lot harder than one might think. Back in the day when I was learning marketing, I would read marketing tactic books, right? Specifically like SEO for dummies, literally AdWords for dummies, Idiot's Guide to AdWords, to try to learn it. Or I'd go on and there was a guy named, I think, Perry Marshall, who, it was all info marketing. There was people who talked about copywriting. This is like 2006, 7, 8. Dan Kennedy had a series of books about marketing. That's how I learned copywriting and direct response. And then I would go get these subject matter specific books. I remember when I started doing Facebook ads with Hittail, I bought every Kindle book, all 3 of them, that had been written about Facebook ads, no joke. And I read all of them and just took notes and then tried things. And so that's how it was back then. There were no people talking about startup marketing. And that is why I started talking a lot about startup marketing, because when I looked around on how to market a startup, it really was a bunch of venture capitalists talking about virality and billboards and like brand advertising and banner advertising. And I don't know, man, it was brutal. And so that's the thing. Let's break down marketing really quick. Like marketing is marketing strategy, and then marketing project management, which you don't really need to learn. It's just keeping on top of people to get done. And then there's the marketing tactics. There's like individual things like AdWords and partnerships and integrations and content and SEO and, and even got cold outreach, which isn't marketing, it's more lead gen. But you get the idea. It's all just getting new people to hear about your product. So marketing tactics, once you have an idea of what you should try in what order, for those, I will go seek out someone who is talking about them. So I know that Steli Efti and Daniel Ebert, who both are TinySeed mentors actually, they talk about sales and cold outreach. And there are several. Honestly, go to tinyseed.com/mentors and look for any sales mentors like Ben Heineck. Anybody who's doing sales mentorship for us is going to be extremely well vetted for B2B SaaS. And if they're on this list, me or someone on my team have personally vetted them. And so if you're looking for content on sales, just go Command F on that page and look for sales. And if they are putting out content, I would say it's probably quite good. Jen Abel also from Jellyfish, the sales content. If I was thinking about marketing strategy and growth, I would be trying to follow Heaton Shaw, Mark Thomas, Dev Basu. Again, these are TinySeed mentors, and I'm not saying them to say, push TinySeed mentors on you. It's the idea is that I handpick the best people in B2B SaaS to be our mentors. So it's an instant filtering. It's a nice filtering for you to say, well, at least these people know what they're doing. Now, then the next question is everyone on the mentor list putting out content? And no, a lot of them aren't. So you'll have to see which of them have a podcast, which of them have a blog, which of them have written a book, and give some thought from there. But the idea is thinking about marketing strategy is a lot harder than tactics. And I have an entire chapter in the SaaS playbook, if you haven't read it, and it's just about marketing. And most of it is talking about how to do marketing strategy, which is like, what should I work on next? Like, should I do SEO? Should I do AdWords? Should I do pay-per-click ads? Should I do other things? And I outline a framework there. It's not the only framework for deciding what to do next. Again, you can follow, I talked about 3 growth folks earlier, Mark Thomas, Heaton, and Dev Basu. You can listen to stuff by Ruben Gomez when he comes on this show. He doesn't put out content on his own because he's too busy growing a company. But, these are folks that are thinking about growth. Brian Balfour is amazing for kind of high-level growth stuff. Now, Brian Balfour is not going to teach you how to click in the AdWords interface, but he's going to teach you how he thinks about growing companies. And so that's the first step I'd be thinking about is, as a developer, a single founder, how do I think about even how to prioritize marketing approaches? And that is why the SaaS Playbook has a chapter on it. Again, I'm not saying it's the only framework, but I have the 3-factor framework in there for thinking about it. Now, once I've picked a marketing approach or 2 that are my next things that I'm going to experiment with, that's when I'm going to go deep on a particular topic. And so for Facebook ads, am I going to go look at Growth Ninja, which is run by a longtime friend of mine and someone who ran Facebook ads for Drip and who has recently run them for my wife, Dr. Sherry Walling. If they put out content on Facebook ads, I'm probably going to look at it. And if I'm going to hire someone to do Facebook ads, it's probably going to be them. And if I want to do content and SEO, am I probably going to look at the content that Ross Hudgens is putting out? He runs an agency of, I don't even know, 100, 120 people that is just a content marketing agency. Yeah, I'm going to look at Ross Hudgens. I like Ross Simmons. Why does everyone name Ross? Ross Simmons is great and puts out quite a bit of content on content marketing and SEO. And of course, I'm going to be looking at anything Asia Arangio puts out and everything that Corey Haynes puts out. Corey Haynes has several sites, including Swipefile and Conversion Factory, and he is putting out AI skills. Even like last week, he put something out that's getting popular. And so these are folks that are legitimate. And what it really depends on, the challenge is you can say, well, does Rob Walling know SaaS marketing? And I would be like, yeah, I do. I'm like not the number one expert on it, but like I generally know how I would market a SaaS. But if you ask me like, okay, so in meta ads, should I use like retargeting or should I do the like lookalike audience and which button should I click? It's like, I don't do that anymore. I did used to, but I haven't done that in 10 or 12 years. And so it depends on what layer you're trying to get to. If you really decide, hey, I'm going to try Facebook or Instagram ads, then you have to go deep. You have to find someone that's reasonable, that you don't feel like is a bunch of fluff. And then you go deep on that particular topic to learn it well enough to implement it yourself, or you spend some budget to hire someone who you get a recommendation for or who you believe is reliable, and you pay them to run those campaigns for you. So that's kind of it. I know I've thrown out a lot of names here, and some of them are more high-level strategy folks and growth folks, and then other people specialize in a particular topic. But that's the key, right? That's why marketing is so complicated, is that you can't just usually find or hire one person to do all of this stuff. No one knows all of this to the degree that you want. And there's going to be no single source for all of the content across all the 20 B2B marketing approaches that I include in the SaaS playbook. I don't know a single individual, including myself, that is actually good at all 20 of those. And so the thing to ask yourself is, well, which ones will reach my customers? Where are my customers? Where do they exist? How can I reach them with marketing? You narrow that list down to the top 2, 3, or 4. And I kind of do that in the SaaS playbook. I say, look, these are the big 5, the most common 5 for Bootstrap SaaS. And then I say, these are the next 5. And these are the most common ones that I see across our types of companies. And then you kind of handpick, well, I know the competitors are doing this, so it probably works. And I know that my folks are actually in Hangouts, and SEO is a big channel. And I think they're on Instagram. If I'm marketing to realtors or artists, like tattoo artists, Instagram is going to be a big deal. And if I'm marketing to hardcore B2B SaaS founders, Instagram is probably not the best place to find them, right? There are better places like LinkedIn or X-Twitter. So I totally hear you on this. Like, there are so many people out there. The fluff content bugs the out of me. And it is one of the reasons that I started writing books, is I was infuriated by not being able to just find legitimate content on marketing my companies in the 2005 to 2010 range. It's why I wrote Start Small, Stay Small, and why so much emphasis in that book is on marketing. And it's about changing your mindset as a developer to think more like an entrepreneur. And thinking like an entrepreneur requires thinking much more about marketing and sales than we typically would as developers. So I hear you and I empathize, with your struggle, right? Of like, where do I go to learn this? And the answer, of course, is these days it depends. Back in the day, it really was like, well, there's kind of one person talking about this, especially in Bootstrap. The Bootstrap circles, it's like Peldy was talking about more like word of mouth stuff and content. And Patrick McKenzie was talking just purely about SEO and dabbled in AdWords. And I was doing SEO, AdWords, and some content marketing. And then we kind of, we all branched out from there. But that gives you an idea. The hard part is figuring out, well, which 1, 2, or 3 approaches do I want to kind of dive into, and then finding reliable sources for each of those. So thanks for that question, Sean. I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful. And that wraps up my listener questions for the day. Thanks so much for joining me today, this week, and every week. I am doing okay on listener questions. I wouldn't say running low, but I could certainly use some more, especially audio, video questions, especially questions that are not for beginners, that are you've launched and you have 5, 10K of MRR, or you have 5, 10 million of ARR. Would love questions on those kinds of topics. Thanks for listening this week and spending another 30 minutes with me. If you keep coming back, I'll keep recording. This is Rob Walling signing off from episode 819.